Good. Jim, how are you? Can you hear us?
I am sorry for the delay. I'm
You're
having
good.
technical difficulties. One camera's not working, one speaker's not working, so I'm glad I'm here.
That's, hey, we were just talking about pays to be nimble. We were just talking, well, we got her.
You got to. There's
It's no
always a
problem.
solution. Just got to figure it out.
Didn't, didn't we used to talk about days gone by? Technology changes everything, huh?
Yes, it
An old
does. Yes,
tagline, an
it
old
does.
tagline from days gone by. All
Yeah.
right, so
No.
we'll get started. So thanks everybody for coming on this beautiful, warm, almost fall day. Fall starts like Monday or something, and that staying off season's winding down.
That's right.
I know, but yeah, so we're going to get so Jim last month talked about rewards. How it has to be a strategic sort of initiative. It can't just be hit and miss. So this month we're talk about that same how important communication is to have a strategy. Because I'm over all these years, what I've found over the years is that leaders cannot not communicate. So pardon my double negative for my English friends here, but what it means in my mind is that no matter what you say or do communicates value, or things you don't say or don't do communicates value. So everything we do and words matter, and people watch stuff and all that sort of business. I think what gets us in trouble a little bit is when, from a leadership standpoint, when words and actions don't connect. People say one thing but behave a different way. That's troubling because we tend to believe action. They tend to believe how people behave more than anything. So I think that's. But yeah, so Jim will give us a good, I think, really good insight into how communication. It has to be a strategic, deliberate initiative. I think so. So again, so if we kind of give a little background about Jim, and like I said, and I said this last time, but so Jim hired me at Ashford all those many years ago, about 2006, maybe something like that. So, and I have to tell you, he asked me the best question anybody ever asked me was about why shouldn't I hire you? Which, when if he answered that right, is the very reason he should hire you. Is how it plays out. So that was one of the best questions I ever been asked. But um, so so again, so I've known Jim a long time. So um, I think Jim, he spent a lot of time in the Army. He's done a lot of his own research, indicates the importance of power of the team to drive performance, which talks about communication and rewards and all that sort of things for a positive outcome. Um, as the old saying goes, as cliche as it might sound, teamwork makes the dream work, I think. So Jim's taught lots of courses at the bachelor, master, and doctoral levels, strategic change management, coaching, supervising employees, organizational leadership, organizational communication, work behavior, change management. Has over 20 years of extensive experience starting organizations and departments, completing turnaround operations. Um, Jim believes that he has the DNA of a salesperson and the mind of an operations expert. So with decades of executive leadership experience, he can see the linkage between technological system efficiency and human behavior. How do we, and I think that's critical in today's world, is how do we connect the tech piece and the human piece so we can operate as efficiently as we can. He believes that his core, the systems and processes can be implemented to create a performance culture, which is what it's about at the end of the day. So Jim, thank you for spending more time with us in addition to what you did last month. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Charlie. Just really quick, can you just confirm you're looking at an actual screen with the slides and not one of my other multiple screens right now? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we have the communication strategy screen.
Awesome. All right. Thank you,
Yep.
Charlie.
Yep.
Pleasure to be with you all today. The word communication is a fascinating one. Everybody I've ever met, there's a room full of educated professionals, and everybody believes that they can communicate well, and yet communication is rarely looked at as a strategic imperative for the organization. It's something that's done. It's not something that's done with strategic intent. Leaders walk into a room and they just start talking, right? They might plan some slides, great, and yet the concept of how does that connect to every other communication? How does it connect to the one-on-one meetings? How are all of these connections made? rarely gets the intentionality, as I like to say, that it deserves. And you know, my book is full of so many quotes by so many brilliant minds out there, but I love this one from Pat McMillan, which I'm going to read. Excellent communication doesn't just happen naturally. It is the product of process, skill, climate, relationship, and hard work. I really want to call out the bookends there of the attributes: process and hard work. Communication is a foundation. Proper communication and a good strategy are foundations to a performance culture, and they are foundations to psychological safety. And you have to create an environment that produces that, and you have to do the hard work. You have to strategically decide how your organization will be communicating. I'm not going to spend time going through all the table of contents. The most important piece that I really want you to get from this, if we talk about any one thing, it's the term psychological safety. Everything is designed to support that. Gallup says that psychological safety is the number one performance element to creating a positive environment where employees will perform. A good communication strategy really is the backbone of a thriving team. You know, effective leaders, you know, obviously they need to create trust and they need to inspire and motivate their people. And we all know that this starts with communication. But how do you do that? Right? So today we're going to talk about some practical ways, not just theory, but very practical ways, tools that you can use, activities that you can pursue to develop an internal communication strategy. Because again, it is about the intentionality of your strategy that is really what matters. When looking at your strategy and you are developing a strong communication strategy, you have to be intentional. You have to be consistent, and you have to ensure there's strong feedback loops. Those are requirements to creating safety and transparency within your organization. And it all starts with a deliberate plan. You have to actually plan out how, what, and when, and where will we be communicating, and how will we be receiving our feedback. You need to create measurable results. It can't just be, well, this is what we're going to do. Any good manager will tell you if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And why so often do we look at communication differently? If we know that it is a foundation of psychological safety, which is a foundation to a performance culture, why don't we try to measure the effectiveness of our communication? And yet that's a key piece. When developing your organizational communication strategy, you need to consider how you're going to measure your results. What are your feedback loops? Right? How are you going to ensure that your employees really grasp the concepts that you're talking to them about, right? You need to make sure you've got feedback loops so that it's not a one-way communication channel. One-way communication is called direction. It's not called communication, right? Communication is a two-way street. And so you need to make sure you've got very, very strong feedback loops so that you can hear the information coming to you. And you need to have a regular strategic cadence: daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, quarterly, however it is, however your strategy lays it out, it needs to be consistent and it needs to happen all the time. You can't just throw a communication out there once in a while and think you are communicating. Your employees need to expect it. And if you're doing this right, they'll start searching for it. The key here is to really make sure that you're doing it deliberately, that you are receiving feedback on a regular cycle, and that you've got a cadence to your communications so that your team knows to expect it. And as it relates to feedback and hearing what your team is providing you, you need to follow the military's mantra. It's this total misnomer in the military where everybody thinks that soldiers are just, you know, blind robots following orders. And it's actually very, very far from the truth. Okay, sure, there may be some platoons and units that operate that way, but for the most part, we've all heard the saying, we've seen it in movies: permission to speak freely, sir. That's a real thing. The ability to say, sir, I got to say something. Speak freely. That is a real military truth. And there's this very old saying in the military that if your soldiers are not complaining, you have a problem. And the problem is you, right? Because what you have not done is create trust. You have not created an environment where your people are going to speak back to you. And let me tell you, being in the military is hard. There's lots of reasons to complain. I've seen very few jobs where there's also not reasons to complain. And if you just go from this, I knew a leader, we were co-leaders in an organization, and her favorite phrase was, well, it sucks to be you. She didn't last long and her orgs never performed. That's the wrong mentality, right? You have to give people the ability to speak freely to you without fear of negative occurrence, negative reprisal for speaking freely, right? That's a cornerstone to a psychologically safe environment. I would believe few people would think that the military and psychological safety go hand in hand. And for the most part, they do. Yes, there are always going to be bad elements. The beauty of humanity is also some of its ugliness that
Oh, you lost him.
Your
to a safe
audio
environment.
there you go.
Oh, where'd you lose me? It must have been very good, whatever I didn't get to you. Where'd you lose me?
About 15 seconds ago.
Okay. Well, it was a beautiful 15 seconds. The key point here is you have to create trust. And you can only do that through open dialogue, being receptive to feedback, even if that feedback is critical. That is a very important piece. You know, speaking of what is in critical, there are some mission critical meetings that must occur. The most important meeting in your organization is that between the manager and the employee, that one-to-one. Your frontline manager and their employee is the single most important meeting in the organization. It's also the most dreaded. Gallup shows that 85% of managers, and I think it's 87% of employees dread this meeting. They dread it. Why? Well, because we don't teach managers how to manage anymore. We just promote people and say, there you go, you did the job, go manage. You know, if you walked into Barnes and Noble 30 years ago and you walked into the business book section, all of the books would have been on how to manage employees. Maybe 40 years ago, it's 2025. Maybe 40 years ago, you would have seen all the books be on how to manage people. Why? Because people are ugly. We are messy. Messy is a better word. You know, we're messy. Things happen. And you have to understand how to have a good conversation, how to have a bad conversation, right? How to give a positive review and a negative review, right? How to manage the reality of the employee, right? We don't teach that anymore. And a critical part of teaching that is teaching the manager how to properly communicate with their employees. And a great way to do that is through the 50-50 meeting. And I got this from my uncle, where every meeting is half quantitative performance data. If you are having a meeting and you're not talking about the quantitative performance of your organization, you are failing as a leader, right? And every employee needs to have a quantitative performance element. Every employee can't be other duties as assigned, right? They have to have quantitative performance data. No employee should ever walk into an annual review already not knowing the outcome. Why do they know the outcome? Because for the last 48 weeks, they've been discussing it with their manager in a one-on-one every single week, right? My book goes on to say that your employees should actually be the ones empowered to bring the data into the meeting so that they know what you're about to talk about. The point here is there needs to be half quantitative performance data and half qualitative personal information. See, because here's the thing. Every employee works for their reasons, not yours. I know that may be a shocker to some people, but your employees aren't there for you. They may stay because of their coworkers, but they walk into that building for their own personal reasons, and you need to know what those are. And the best way to do that is in that one-on-one meeting where you can have a qualitative discussion, half data, half person, half performance, half human. You have to have that in every single meeting so that you can really get to know the person and get to know how the performance is being related, right? That also lends itself to the all staff meetings. These have to be regular. People have to look forward to them. They can't be random. And in that, you need to have your organization's quantitative performance data. I took over a turnaround operation once, and I was sharing the P&L, and I had interviewed somebody for this book, for my book. And one of the people was a former employee of mine, and she said, Jim, at first I walked into these meetings, I had no idea why you were sharing the P&L, why we were seeing this. I thought you were wasting my time. And what I quickly realized is how you were able to help me see myself in that data, right? So she started to look forward to it because the big picture was broken down to the little picture for her. And that is the quantitative performance data. Everybody needs to know the health of your organization. That's half the meeting. The other half should be qualitative, right? Personal stories, getting to know people, news for the organization, training. I love starting every single meeting, whether it's a one-on-one, a team, a division, or an entire organization, with personal stories. Hey, this is what happened to me this weekend. What happened with somebody else? Anybody else want to share a story? And what's so cool about it is pretty soon people become comfortable sharing their personal stories. And then you have other employees going, wow, I didn't know that about Jim. Or, wow, Charlie really did that? That's so cool. Charlie may have never told that person this because Charlie doesn't go to lunch with that person. That person sits on the opposite side of the building. Whatever the case may be, they're not in their circle, right? And so when you do this, you give people an opportunity to get to know each other at a more personal level. And that's really the key. Again, everybody's showing up for their reasons, not yours. So make sure that you have intention to find out what that is by adding qualitative communication to both your individual and your larger team structures. And I put remote meetings on here because I've been leading remote teams since 2018. So the world of existing on the other side of a camera has been my life since before the world shut down. And one of the things that I've noticed in the remote world is how often the person on this side of the screen talking to the camera is just talking and not asking, right? They're just sharing information. It's direct communication. They're not spending the time to get to really know the other individual. If I'm on, okay, how many people are on a screen? If I'm running a team meeting, we're starting every single one of them trying to get to know each other at a more personal level. It is even more important when we're talking about remote employees so that they can all feel connected. We do not have to be in the same building to have a strong, productive performance environment. Trust me, I've been doing it since 18. It's entirely possible if you spend the time. Spend the time to get to know the person on the other end of the screen. When we talk about getting to know people and we talk about sharing information, we have to recognize every single person's favorite radio station is WIIFM. WIIFM is painted on the top. It's a tattoo on everybody's forehead that only you can see if you care to look for it, right? What's in it for me? What does that mean? Means that every communication, it does need to be tailored to that person and their job. Now, I'm sure several of you in this room have went, yeah, that's a lot of work. And guess what? You're right. It is. It's a lot more work to shut down an organization, let me tell you. So what you want to do is create an environment where your employees are performing, right? Charlie, I think you can attest to that, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's painful in every single way we could think. So you have to tailor the communication so that people understand, how does it help them do their job better? Look, employees can tell if you email them the same thing that you put out on the street, the same thing that you would share with the world, right? You have to be communicating with your employees in a way that helps them do their job better. You got to cut the brand speak, right? You got to speak to them as employees, not as customers, right? Talk to them like humans who do the work. Tailor your communications to them. Remember their favorite radio station. What's in it for me? You can also turn that into what's in it for the productivity of your organization. And that's making sure your people understand whatever it is you're telling them, how it's going to help them do their job. How do you know if they've really heard you? Well, Well, you listen with intentionality. Yes, that's an obvious one. I was going to say more important. That's not true. Connected to that is actually asking what you heard. See, because here's the thing. While I'm sitting here talking, my brain can only do one thing. It's a fascinating thing about the human brain. When we're talking, we can only talk and think, and they're doing the same thing. We can't do anything else. But right now, every single one of your brains are doing three things, at minimum, three things, right? Because the brain's ability to process information is so much faster than the human mouth can speak, even my mouth, which can speak too fast at times. Um, so next time you're giving a direction to an employee, when you get done, pause, stop, and ask them what they heard. You'd be amazed at the feedback you receive. See, because while you're talking, there's a very good chance they're thinking about their personal life, or they're thinking about where they're going to lunch, or the fact that they're hungry, or the fact that they're sick, their wife's sick, they're whatever sick, right? Like they're thinking about so many other things, and they might have only caught part of what you said. So what happens is they either A, make it up, or B, they go ask someone else. And now you've got someone else who's interpreting what they heard, only half listening, telling this person, and now you've really created a problem. So just pause and ask. Pause and ask. Cornerstone of a proper communication strategy. Make sure you actually ask what it is you've heard so that you know if that reflection is accurate. Feedback is critical, right? Effective communication has nothing to do with how clearly you articulate your message. The accuracy with which you speak is irrelevant. If you can say one word and your message is understood, then you have properly communicated, right? Because it's all about, was it understood? And so your people have to have an ability to share back information so that you can really understand whether or not they're hearing you. And they have to be comfortable sharing that information about anonymous and personally identifiable information, right? They need to be able to share information without fear of identification. I was working with an organization, terrible communication when I got there. Turnover rate was horrific. Gallup surveys were horrendous. Psychological safety and communication was one of the primary complaints. And so we had to build an anonymous feedback channel. And what we found over about 6 months period of time is that the anonymous communication shrank and the personally identifiable information grew because people got to a point where they realized that they could share negative feedback, they could share critical feedback without fear of reprisal. So you need to make sure you have an anonymous communication channel as well as directly attributable, right? You need to have regular all staff meetings where you're sharing the feedback you've received. Well, the feedback that's HR appropriate to share. Sometimes you receive things that you just can't share in a public forum. And so that's different. Everything else, it's really important to tell the staff, hey, this is what we heard this month, so that everybody knows you're listening. And what are your direct action plans because of it? It's not good enough to say, hey, this is what we heard. You have to say, and this is what we're acting upon. Now, see, here's the thing. Not everything can be acted upon. Some of it's totally out of scope for your organization. So you need to explain what is being acted upon, what is not being acted upon, and why. Why are you acting upon this? And then what is your action plan to do that? Right? Some things are going to require budgetary consideration. So you can say, hey, we received this feedback, really, really good, love it. It's going to have budgetary implications. So we're going to look at this for 2026. We'll revisit this when we're going through our budget cycle. And if we can fit this in, we shall. If we cannot, we'll come back and tell you why, right? People don't need to know you do what they say. They just need to know you're listening. So you have to tell them, this is what I've heard. This is what I'm acting upon and why. This is what I'm not acting upon and why. So that they understand that they're not just throwing notes to the wind, that the organization actually cares about what they're hearing. All right. So what I want to leave you with is that you need to prioritize your open channels of communication. You need to make sure you have your feedback loops. This creates the environment of trust where employees are more motivated and self-managing. And that is an ideal working environment, right? But you got to remember the goal is clear candid, and tailored communication, not brand speak, but communication tailored to the employee so that they understand how to do their job better. You must receive feedback in a psychologically safe environment. You must create action plans from not everything you hear, everything that can be acted upon. And you need to let your people know what you will and will not be acting upon. And then finally, you really need to make sure that you are following the 50-50 meeting format to every meeting. Half quantitative performance data, half qualitative, getting to know the people, sharing news, doing training, whatever the case may be. It can't be all numbers and it can't be all qualitative. It has to be a combination of both in order to create the right performance environment. Thank you all for your time. Charlie, I will share this PowerPoint with you. You can share with everybody else. Here's my contact information. What questions can I answer?
Other questions, concerns? I always ask for emotional outbursts, you know, if anybody has that. At some point, somebody's gonna take me up. No, I think, you know, I don't know if anybody online does, like, pop something into the chat perhaps, but, you know, just some stuff I think you hit really, just not that long ago, you talk about the military and people not saying things. So, you know, I'm the kind of guy, if you ask me my opinion, I'm really gonna tell you. I'm just gonna tell you. But, you know, it was like this, all this change stuff and like nobody was saying much. So he goes, this person was really under the belief that it was okay. And my comment was, listen to the silence. What is that silence telling you? Listen to the silence. Like, I mean, why is just because people aren't saying anything, you know, doesn't mean people get it or buy in or whatever. So that's how I go. Listen to the silence, because when you're talking about the military stuff, it made me think of that very thing. It's like, you know, listen to the what's it telling you. So you have to, especially if you're doing stuff in big groups, people. You talk about psychological safety. I mean, you got to have a lot of people are going to speak in a big group. Holy mackerel! I mean, that's got to be ingrained in that for people to speak up. They're like, because I think over the years, it's the risk of saying something versus the risk of saying nothing. That's where it boils down to. And if you're in these groups and you don't have that sort of psychological safety or net or whatever you want to call it, people are just going to shut up because the risk of saying something is too great. Personally, it's too great. Professionally, it can be too great. So you know what? I'm just going to sit here and nod. And then after the meeting, people complain and talk about what they were just a part of because they weren't comfortable talking about. I call it bathroom bitching. So I don't know. But other people call it hallway venting, you know. Parking, yeah, you can call it whatever you want to, but then they talk about it afterwards that they were just a very part of. So, yes, I think that, yeah, that's that. If people aren't saying nothing, I think that's a communication trouble is when people shut down. That's really the problem. When people don't say anything, or when they quit talking to each other, that's when you got a big problem. Is when people shut down because then it's, you know, sometimes people may at that point like just give up. It's not worth my effort. That sort of stuff. So they shut down. So I think that's critical. But when you brought up that, made me that conversation about listen to the silence because it's telling you more than you think it is. I think, yeah, and I think there's lots of, especially times of great change. You talk about being in front of people. Yeah, man, you can't hide when times are tough. You gotta be in front of people. And I'm a believer in, we've all heard of this great mind thing. I don't think you can stop it. I think we can try to just manage it. Because people are gonna chirp and all that kind of stuff. But my experience has been in some ways you have to put good information into the pipeline if you're gonna try to manage it. Or people, you ever played that telephone game? You get like 10, 12 people and it starts up here and by the time it gets to the back person, the message is completely different. Selective hearing, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so I think that's just critical to the process. And I think the greatest, and Jim, I think the greatest communication tool we have is the ability to ask questions. Ask for clarity, especially at the end of a meeting. You ever walk out, you're like, I have no freaking idea what I'm supposed to do. You ever walk out or it's like, I have no idea who's supposed to do it, what I'm supposed to do, when I'm supposed to do it. So then it's like, you walk out more confused than when you went in. That's not healthy. This is not healthy. But if you have to, yeah, you have to end, okay, here's what we decided. Here's who's going to do what. Here's the deliverable, when it's deliverable, that kind of thing. A great book to talk about is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team's a fabulous book. It's a fabulous book. And the number one dysfunction is lack of trust. That feeds everything else. So I think I mean, that's just really important stuff. So, yeah, we'll talk about just some other stuff. I took lots of notes here, but you ever heard of the Peter Principle? People get promoted to their level of incompetence. So what happens is people are competent here, then they get promoted up, and now they're incompetent. I've seen it sometimes in the sales world. Someone might be a great salesperson, but that doesn't make them a great sales manager. Getting results for yourself is different than getting results through other people. So that's what I've seen a little bit. Because who do we purport to sales managers? Generally good salespeople. But I've seen more than a couple times where they've just failed miserably because they don't have that skill set, because they got promoted to their level of incompetence. And then everybody, it's just not good. You can lose good people and all that kind of stuff. So I think all that kind of stuff matters. So I don't know what else. I think, yeah, you talk about tell the story. I think that's, especially if it's and I think Jim had it right. If you're telling quantitative stuff to non-quantitative people who don't know a debit from a credit or any of that kind of stuff, you got to tell them the story. Here's this, but let's tell them the story of how what they did impacted this story, positive, negative. Because they can look at it like, it doesn't mean anything to me. But what happens is the story that tell behind the numbers is what people dig and what people connect with. Oh, now I get it. This is what happened, and this is why it happened, and this is how I impacted it one way or another. So I think that's critical, especially if you're telling quantitative stuff to non-quantitative people, because they don't. Yeah, this is fine, but so those little brackets are bad. Is that what you're telling me? Yeah, probably. So, but you have to, yeah, probably. But you have to tell people the law. I think that's critical.
I think you need to build on the one-on.
Yeah.
If you don't take the time to
Yeah.
build on the one-on-one, you don't know if that person is capable of understanding.
You get to know your audience.
Hello, Wayne.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I'm actually emailing Chad right now.
Okay.
So Chad, you don't even know Chad. Chad is smoke rehab. Sorry, to try to get like a job shadow. So she said that she's going on a business trip next week, and she said she doesn't have any time for anything this week, but this week would be too soon. So we're gonna do it the week after.
There, sorry. It was almost like I thought it was the. Yeah.
I thought it was. But I think all that kind of stuff, and feedback's really a gift. I think it's what we need to hear. It's not always what we want to hear. We don't always want to hear what we need to hear, but I think that's what we need to hear to get better. And how do we, because if you don't try to correct that behavior, and those one-on-ones, and they're important, but they can be really uncomfortable. Sometimes it's hard to sit eyeball to eyeball with somebody and kind of give them difficult feedback. It can be, but as we talk in conflict, we have to manage our uncomfortable. Because if you let it go on and go on and go on, this will get really uncomfortable if you don't manage that uncomfortable conversation in front of it. It's going to go on and on and on. Behavior's going to get repeated. It's going to get worse. Chance of making it worse. So I think it's just hard. And I think it's hard. It's hard. That's why I'm not a fan of the soft skill stuff. There's nothing soft about this. This is hard work. It's hard skills, not soft skills. So that's why I've never been a huge fan of soft skills for that very reason. But yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, and I think you got to get to know people beyond name, rank, and serial number. What makes them tick? You want to provide opportunities, but opportunities are meaningful for people. And because you think about what's meaningful for us, we all might have something different that's meaningful for us. Refuse some cookie cutter approach. Yeah, this is fine, but I don't really give a damn about this or doesn't mean anything to me, well, then you've gone the other way with it. You're like, no, I'm just doing busy work that doesn't mean anything to me. It's all about relationship. I mean, you gotta get to know people. I have to, I did a lot when I started my district, after many years ago, we did this lifeline exercise, and I did it in class lots of times. And it's really safe because people can share what they want to share. So you got this piece of paper, put it on the wall, and people just tell their life story on this piece of paper. And you can tell whatever you want. Some people told a lot, almost too much. Holy Toledo. I know you a lot better than I did 10 minutes ago. There's no doubt about that. But they were safe, but they felt good sharing it. And other people just minimal. They just shared. I told them, I go, there's no right or just tell us what you want to tell us about. Some people did a little, some people did a lot. But it's good to get to know people in a non-threatening sort of way, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's your story. Tell us your story. And I've done a lot of stuff. So I've done like team dynamics, whatever. It's just tell us your story. And you put it up on the wall, and then they would get up and they would tell their story. But again, some would tell a little and some would tell a whole lot. But as long as you're comfortable sharing, share what you want to share. So, I don't know if anybody else is, I'm just kind of rambling here, but there's just so much, it's just really important stuff. I mean, it's really important stuff as we do that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we went to this year, which is really interesting. I love the other duties as assigned. Holy mackerel.
That on every job.
Yeah, that's the most awful thing ever. Here's all the crap that you don't want to do falls into this bucket. It's like other duties as assigned bucket. So we went to what's known as a statement of work. So here's what we have to do. In my world, education, it got broken down into 3 buckets. It's either teaching, learning, leadership, or service. Okay, so for most people that are full-time faculty, half their job is teaching. So you have to, what's teaching? Well, then the other part boils down to learning, leadership, and service. And they got to kind of pick what fit in those certain things. We worked together to give them more choice in what to do. I think choice is a good thing, as best you can for leadership. So if you give people choice on how they can do their job. So the other 50%, they got some choice on what fit into some of that kind of stuff. And avoided the other duties as assigned. Because that's always the catch-all. Man, oh man, here it comes. Here comes other duties. So if things, let's say, because we can't look around corners, let's say if we got to 3-4 months, and we review this every month. So I review every month with everybody to make sure it still makes sense as things changed or whatever. So, yeah, so it's just, if things come around the corner, then we can do, so it's a living document. So let's say something comes up when you take up, we can remove some things from your statement of work and add things into your statement of work. So it's a living document. It's not like, where's the job description, everyone's living about that thing. That's all about other duties aside. But yeah, so we got to a statement of work. And so I worked on, I agreed with them, and we sent out the ladder and other people at the same time. It's a living document. So if something happens down the road, because what we want to avoid is people going, that's not my job. So let's talk about so that's some choice and, how do we support students? You can support students without necessarily having directly supervised faculty who do that. So it's just a different way of thinking about work. And some people had a hard time grasping it because they were so used to just this and this. And if you step off the dot, boom, I didn't do this piece of my job. So just give them more choice in how to do it. It's interesting. This is the first thing we've done, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, that's, it needs to be nimble on that stuff, but we have to review it all the time to see, does it still make sense? There's other committees that come up, but the only thing that's non-touchable for full-time faculty who teach is the 50% teaching. That's where we can't borrow from that because that's their main job function. But if we're going to move stuff around, it has to be in learning, leadership, and service. That's where we have to move it because we don't want them to teach less because that's their core function. So, and in the past, what's happened is that it kind of, actually what happened, and it can't add up to over 100% either. Sometimes it added up as we kept going on, it became 115%. Well, how the hell do you do 115% effective? What's that look like? How do you do that? You know, something has to give, and generally, it's just not fair to people. The word played it's just not fair to people. People should not have to work 70 hours a week, 60 hours a week to do the 40-hour week jobs. It's not fair. It's not fair. It burns people out. People look elsewhere, you lose good. It's just not fair. So that's what we went to. I go, and you can't come in with 100 because you can't. This is not fair. And I want to make sure, because what happened, it was so administrative heavy for a while. They had to do teaching at night. I go, that's not how it works. If you're gonna do most of your job, you're gonna do it during the daytime. And I gave them the ability to block out their calendar when they're doing teaching stuff, so people cannot put administrative things on their calendar. With a certain trust that they're gonna do it right. You know, there had to be a certain trust that they're not gonna, you know, if I look in there, someone's blocked it all week, well, we might have to have a chat about that, well, yeah, I'm gonna give them the ability to trust them to manage their calendar that way. But if it's blocked out, people won't add these admin tasks in the middle. So trust is great. And I think trust is critical. This whole, I won't trust you to do that until you give me some reason not to trust you. That's it. To me, it's that simple. But yeah, but if you're going to try to stick it to me, then we're probably going to have a different conversation. But that's okay. Yeah, but this communication, this is really critical stuff. It's really critical, and it is hard. Because we're always, the best parts, everybody's different, the most challenging. The best parts, everybody's different. Most challenging parts, everybody's different. That's the hard part, everybody's different. You know, we can't just program people. That's not how it works. So, I don't know. That's,
I believe that's the TV show Severance. I haven't watched it, but.
just program people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just hard. But it's worth the effort. I mean, that's the thing. It's worth the effort.
Anybody online have anything?
I can talk about this all day. So.
Well, and it's ever changing too.
Yeah.
So, you know, you had mentioned, you know, tell your story. I took a Dale Carnegie leadership class and, you know, some people got up and they were short and sweet with their story, but other people got up and they shared their story and there was tears and it was like real emotional. And
Yeah.
I'm sure if we would do that again, if people would have a different story, you know, but so it changes all the time.
Yeah. It's amazing when people, you give the ability to people to tell their story. And I told last time, I start every meeting we have, you have to tell us one good thing that happened to you since the last time we met. And you can't pass. There's no pass. But, and you can tell more, can I give more than one? You give 6 if you want, I don't care. But you have to give at least one. It's amazing, people, you watch their faces, people light up because they want to tell their story.
Some people light up.
Yeah, some people light up.
Some people that.
I don't.
Don't
Fear
you?
of talking, don't.
Matt, you're always.
Beer
lit up.
talking. I
We
mean,
actually do that in elementary school.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was Fridays, you know, they would say their good thing Friday and they'd have to, maybe it was Mondays after the weekend, but they had to have a good thing and they would go around the room.
Yeah, it's just one good thing. We used to
Yeah.
do, when I taught class on campus, we had high five Fridays. So we had, it consisted of 3 things. Yeah, it consisted of high fives, a high five Friday song. So I had a song, I think it picked, but it had to be approved by me. I have to have a little control in life. But then, and then we said high fives, and they had candy, so I had this big candy room. That was high five Friday. It was just fun, it's just weird, fun stuff. You don't have to break the bank to engage people. I think. Yeah, that was my high five Friday. When we did it, so. It's fun, but it's hard. I think the bottom line, it's hard, man. Stuff is hard. It takes time, takes effort, takes energy, takes a little bit. By the time you know the answer, somebody changes the questions. I mean, it's just hard. So you just keep plugging away at it. So.
How do you relate that back to the lesson for me? The one good thing that happened to me since we last met.
Uh-huh.
All right, what's in it for them to share that?
So I think part of it is and that's a good question. I always tell people, because most of the classes I teach are like management classes, but I always tell people, I don't care where you work at, you have to be part of a team. I don't care where you work at. You have to be big team, small team, and part of that is teams is effective relationships. Not that you have to be big buddies with everybody, not that you have to, well, you don't have to do that. but you have to have form effective relationships. And part of it is knowing people other than name, rank, and serial number. So that's a good thing. And so I think it tries, what's in it for them is helping them to become better teammates, I think, better. That's kind of how I go at it, if that type of thing. And it can be anything. Maybe some things are really small. Some people tell big things. It's just a little, this just happened. Cool. We don't critique what they say. You don't go, you gotta know, but it is what it is. If you think it's a good thing, that's very cool. It's a good thing. I'm not gonna, we're not gonna critique it and go, oh, you gotta come with a better thing. Well, that's not it. Well, no, I'm gonna shut up because you just killed my psychological safety because I gotta come with something. Yeah, but that's a good question. I think that's what it's about is, because you're gonna have to be a team member no matter where you go. No matter where you are, you're gonna have to be that. So how do I form effective relationships with people? And again, not that you have to be big buddies, but you have to have effective relationships with people. You can get anything done. So that's my 2 cents.
Charlie, I'm gonna bounce to get to my next meeting. I want to prepare for,
Sure.
as a quick answer to that question, remember there's this
Sure.
old saying in management that people quit bosses and stay for teams. So it
Yep.
relates to what you were just talking about, Charlie, that it's all about the team
Yeah.
in order to create the right environment.
Yeah, think about that. Think about jobs you might have left. That's a lot of times what it is, because you can't really be functional in this environment. So it's like, and the sad part is you lose really high performing people. It's a really sad part. That's the rule. That's what you lose if someone's. But that's okay. But Jim, thank you. Your insight is invaluable. I love your practical application of stuff is really important. You can talk lots of theory, but I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes on practical stuff. So we appreciate that so much.
Awesome. Happy to get back to Clinton. Thank you, my
All
friends.
right.
Take care today.
All right, Jim. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
thank you, everybody
Peace to
online. See you next month. Thank you, Jim.
All right.